Elite Gaming.
What's up guys, it's Andrew at EliteGamingHQ, and in this video, I'm bringing you something more on the PC hardware side, and today I want to talk about your PSU. Now I get tons of questions on my Instagram and my Twitter about what power supply people should use, and hopefully with this video, I'll give you a better understanding and help you choose the correct power supply for your system. I feel like the power supply is a very important part. It is the heart of your PC, and not only can it go bad, but it can take other parts with it. And in some very extreme cases, it can catch on fire. But before we talk about all that, I would just like to add that I'm going to put these type of videos in a playlist. I did videos like this in the past about SSDs, about how much RAM you need, about if you need a CPU cooler. So these type of videos I'm going to make a specific playlist for. Because if you guys are anything like me, or if you found this video because you're looking for information for power supplies, I have a thirst for knowledge. When I get into something new, I want to learn everything I can about it, no matter what that topic is. And for you guys, you might have stumbled across this video because you're trying to learn as much as you can about PCs or PC gaming. So to help you with that, I'm going to make a new playlist, and it's going to be everything you need to know about PC hardware. And every single month, I'm going to add a video to this playlist. So this way it keeps growing and everybody's knowledge can get better. Now that being said, it's always good to get knowledge from multiple sources, and I'm going to try to blanket cover everything about power supplies today without being too overwhelming, and also give you a good understanding going forward to what you need to build your own computer, or to simply select the power supply you should use for someone else maybe building your computer. And at the end of the video, we're going to talk about how to determine how many watts your PC is actually using. And there's a couple calculators for this, and they work really well. So the first thing, I can't stress this enough, you want quality over quantity of watts. Hands down, every single time. You don't want a no-name brand, 900 watt power supply, that's 900 peak watts by the way, without any kind of certification or any kind of name that backs the product. Once again, power supplies can fail, and when they do, it could be catastrophic. Me personally, I stick to a couple brands that I built every computer with because I've had 2 power supplies fail on me in the past, and I refuse to let it happen again. And one time on an AM3 platform, it actually took my motherboard with it, which was an ASRock Pro AM3 Plus. Because that sucked pretty bad, because not only did I run out and buy a new power supply, I bought a high-end one at Best Buy because it's what they had and I had to fork out the money to get my system up and running again. It also still didn't work. So doing further tests, I found it was also my motherboard, which really sucked. But you live and learn. So the moral of the story, I mostly stick with Thermaltake, EVGA, and Cooler Master. I know Antec is also a good brand, but these are the 3 that I stick with, and you got a pretty good spread there where you can usually always catch one on sale. Now I'm not saying these are the only brands that are good. I'm saying these are the only ones that I use that I personally trust. So if you have something else and it's a good solid brand and it works great in your computer, then that's awesome. But for me, that's enough variety where I don't have to trust anything else. These companies have a huge product line, and I can find the right PSU for the right occasion, whether it be budget or high-end, modular, semi-modular, or just full cables. Alright, so let's talk about that 80 plus certified that a lot of people throw around. What exactly does this mean? Well, I can put a little chart here for you and kind of explain how it works. If your power supply just has a peak wattage, then you have no idea how good it's going to run. An efficiency of 80 plus basically means that 20%, 50%, and 100% load, it is going to be 80% efficient at taking the wall power and converting it over to direct current for your PC setup. Now let's take this a step further. Basically, since most power supplies are going to be running at a threshold of 50 to 100%, a gold certified power supply is roughly running at 90% efficiency across the board. But you don't really need gold. Honestly, I think 80 plus is the way to go because it's easy on the wallet. Basically, that stops fluctuation of power through continual use of your computer that could possibly harm components. Making these PSUs has become so cheap nowadays that you can pick up a good solid 80 plus power supply for around 40 or 50 bucks. There's no real reason to skip on this because it's a risk you don't want to take. But you might be saying to yourself, well, I have a huge power supply, so do I really need to worry about efficiency? And yes, you do, because once again, it is the fluctuation. So if we go back to, I only buy power supplies from a couple vendors, the reason why, not only are they guaranteeing that I don't have a huge fluctuation, they're also coming with solid components. So there's multiple different layers of things that you have to look at and consider when you get a power supply. Honestly, one of the best things you can do is just look at a lot of reviews and see how good your PSU is before you buy it, so this way you're not just setting your money on fire. But the other important thing is how many watts do you need, because everyone seems to go overboard with this, and I have to constantly tell people that, hey, you don't need 800 watts. In fact, I want to say about 90% of people only really need 500 watts, and that's on a high-end gaming rig. 450 or 400 would even be enough. But to give you an example, I used Cooler Master's power supply calculator, and you can use multiple ones. They're going to give you very close to similar results, except each vendor that supplies a power supply calculator, they'll kind of be like, hey, you should buy this brand from us, and this is the one we recommend. You can just ignore that, but you can use the calculator to give you a rough estimate. So on the screen now will be a full system setup of a guy I know in real life that I game with. And he has a GTX 1060, he has a 7600K, a 1TB hard drive, a couple USB devices, and we're sitting at 310 watts, and the recommended PSU usage is 360. So you would be fine with a 400 watt PSU for this situation, because basically that's what they recommend. I personally would probably go with something like 500 watts so you have overclocking headroom, and you can do upgrades to like a better graphics card in the future. But let's say we want to add some extras to this PC. He suggested that he wanted to double his RAM, add an SSD, and add a lot more LEDs, right? So how many more watts is that going to take? I mean, that seems like a lot. Well, not really. That puts us at 317 watts, and in fact, the same power supply is recommended. Parts have become so efficient these days that you don't really need massive power supplies. The biggest thing in your system that's going to take a lot of energy is your GPU. And when people used to use huge power supplies, that's when people used graphics cards that sucked 300 watts easy, and they were also running multiple. Cross-firing a few graphics cards at 300 watts each is going to put you needing a 1200 watt power supply. But Crossfire SLI is not really utilized too well today, and if you were going to spend the money for a second graphics card, you're just better going to the next tier up of graphics card, which will be a lot less watts than using double. But for an example, let's look at a couple systems that I've used. Alright, this is my previous i7 build. This is a computer that I used before my current one. 16 gigs RAM, RX 580, 7700K, an M.2, 3 SSDs, one 3TB hard drive, a bunch of fans, some LED strips, USB devices, and we're looking at 450 watts. That is crazy. For your recommend power supply, they recommend 451, and they said that I would be fine with a 650. I currently use a 750 watt. And now on to my current system, which is an R7 1700X, overclocked to 4 GHz, 16 gigs of RAM, GTX 1080, the same hard drives, 2 more fans that are 140mm, and the change was roughly 16 watts. Now these are all based on an assumption that you're using your computer for 8 hours a day or less. They might recommend a little more if you use your computer more per day, but the moral of the story is the same. You do not need a massive power supply. For a system like mine, I would recommend a Thermaltake 700 watt that you can pick up for about 50 bucks, and you'll never run into any issues. You can even get away with a 600 watt power supply, but I like to keep a little headroom in case I want to do something crazy in the future. So I'm going to put a link in the description so you guys can go check out this power supply calculator, and if not, you can just type into Google power supply calculator and find whatever one you want. You don't necessarily have to use Cooler Master. It's just the one that I like to use. I think even PC Part Picker tells you how many watts it thinks you're going to use with the current system that you're putting together there. So that's another thing you can check out. Lastly, let's talk about modular, semi-modular, or just a plain old power supply. Do you need modular? Now this is going to be opinion based because those things cost a lot more money from tier to tier. And I personally think that most people do not need a modular power supply whatsoever. I have a modular power supply and honestly, I don't need it. I mean, I'm maybe not using 1 or 2 plugs on the power supply, and the way most cases are designed, you can't see those wires. So you could probably save yourself 30 bucks by just going with a full plain old regular power supply and just tucking those cables in. But if you do have an open concept case in which you can see your power supply, the modular or semi-modular, let me say, is nice. Modular is completely ridiculous. That means every single wire is plug and go, and that doesn't make any sense because semi-modular, from my understanding, what I've purchased is the main power cables for your motherboard, and to be able to disconnect them doesn't really make sense unless you're swapping out cables. And at that point, then you're going to want a fully modular power supply, and only then would you. And that's for if you're going to use some cool cables like these here that I have. And yes, they're cool, but the markup really isn't there for it. It's kind of ridiculous. You got to think, for a 750 to 850 watt compatible power supply for these wires is about $90, and that's if you get it on sale. And then these wires themselves are $60, so it doesn't really make sense to me to do this unless you're really at the top end of your PC. If you do want flashy cables like this, I recommend buying extensions, because most of the time you're only going to see your GPU connections and your motherboard power connections, which is about 3 wires in general, and this just doesn't seem worth it to me. But as always, it is your money, so you can decide to do it as you please. And like I said, power supplies are very important, and this is why in the Don't Buy I Buy Power or Cyber Power video I did, I kind of stressed this a bit, because this is something these companies skimp on, and I don't think that you should skimp on. And if you're building it yourself, definitely don't. And if you have one of these PCs, it's only what, $40 or $50 to get a new power supply, a good one, a good solid one. And most people are not going to keep a second power supply on hand. So what's going to happen when your power supply fails if you decided to go with a cheap one? Well, you're going to be like, oh, I'm hosed, I want to use my computer, so you're going to run out to the local store or try to prime one in the next day, and you're going to spend a lot more money than you would have if you were to just originally bought the good power supply. So if you do have a shitty one in your computer, my best advice is just change it out now. It doesn't cost a lot of money. If you need any advice on which one to get, just comment down below and I'll try to help you out. Also, as I said, I'm going to make a playlist for these type of videos, so if you're interested in that, subscribe, or even better, hit that bell for notifications, so this way you see the videos as they come out. And be sure to check out any other content on this channel. We're just going to keep moving forward, and I've been loving all the support I've been getting from all you guys. So thanks for watching, guys. My name is Andrew, and I'll catch you on the next one.